And I remember, like, for me, I would have panic attacks all the way from grammar school to high school. Like, I would literally get up and then I'll tell my teacher, like, I have to get out. Like, I would tell her, like, I can't breathe. I remember the first time that it happened to me.
And welcome back to another episode of Never Too Shy. My name is Tati.
Nestor. I always want to say the brow.
Oh
Every single episode. Huh?
Yeah, this was like the third time you don't say Nestor and you want to say the brow, bro. So if you look to my right, this is not Paulina. That's normally where I sit. But this is actually a very special guest who is here to talk about something extremely important. His name is Oscar. Give it up for Oscar. Woo!
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yay! We're so excited to have you. So Oscar, I told you a little bit that we're going to start with our affirmations. And then we're going to get started with our topic at hand, which I'm really excited to talk about and pick everybody's brain on. So do you want to start, Oscar, since you're first? Sure. You're the guest.
I would say something that I always go by is run your own race. And I remind myself that a lot. And by that, like, you can just apply it to different parts of your life or whatever you're currently doing, whether it's like running a race, or whether it's like you're working out, whether it's you're starting a new hobby. For me, it's like you're going to go at a different pace, and that's okay. Like, you're not going to run a marathon in a month, even if somebody's gonna pass you by. Like, you might, like how they say the turtle and the rabbit, right? Like, you might win if you just take your time and like do it at your own pace. Or like even people who are in school, like, just be patient and trust the process, and like you will finish at your own race, right? So I try to remind myself about that quote whenever like I'm struggling, or when I feel like, why am I not there yet? Or like, why haven't I've been doing this for such a long time and I'm not as successful as that person?
Yes.
But I will eventually get there at my own time.
I love that. I feel like I needed to hear that. Thank you for that. He spoke to me deep down. Yeah. What about you, Nestor?
I'm thinking
the
about
brow bow. Oh, you want me to go then? Yeah. Okay. So I think mine is just see things for what they are. Just sometimes you don't have to overthink things, and I'm the overthinking queen. And you just have to take things for what they are and see things for what they are. I always say God puts what he wants you to see in front of him. So I think that's a big part of it. Don't overthink, see things for how they are, and keep it pushing. That's mine. It's very simple today.
Oh my God.
I know.
I still haven't thought about it in my head. Marco, can you go before me?
I don't do affirmations.
But can you do
He wants you to do one today.
Can you do one today, please? Inspire.
Imagine his is just as quick.
Yeah, I mean, my affirmation would be similar to Tati's last week, where, comparison is a thief of joy. I think you used that one. That one really struck with me because I think people nowadays, in this internet age, want to compare each other. And they don't understand, that your chapter might not be where this other person's chapter is in their own book. And I think it's really important to realize what people show you is what they want you to see. It's not necessarily what they're actually going through. So I think if people overshare or show a lot or try to overcompensate by showing material things, whatever, it's because there might be some issues there. So just saying that. All right, Nestor, I gave you 30 seconds. So.
Don't. Nah, I guess it goes along with, like, basically me not knowing right now. But it's okay to not always know everything.
There you go. I love that. That's
it's okay
real.
to not always know everything. I think it's about, just being you all the time. And I think that's a way of life that I've adapted to. But yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, I love that
like,
too.
Especially in my profession now, I remind myself of that like, I'm not going to have all the answers, and there's going to be people who are going to know more. And it's all about like helping each other.
Yes.
And it's crazy because you start looking more like dumb when you're actually trying to like
fake it till you make it, but you're faking is terrible.
Or just be like a know-it-all. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like, you don't know this and it's okay. People can tell when you don't know what you're talking about. And you look a lot smarter or just a lot more wholesome when you just come to admitting that you don't know.
Got it.
So yeah.
Yeah, I think there's also that's also like being vulnerable, and I think there's beauty in vulnerability. You just have to be willing to not take the lead sometimes and allow other people to lead you and follow and ask questions. And I think one thing, you probably may not guess this, but I think I'm pretty inquisitive and I ask a lot of questions. I do not have all the answers. And I think I'm learning that more now because I'm super humbled, y'all. I'm taking a statistics class. Oh my God, I am so humbled. If you are good at statistics, holla at me. I am struggling. I mean, I'm getting it done, but like, I feel like I have to work triple as hard. It's not like writing a paper. So for me, I'm like looking at my high school kids in front of me, like, I feel you. Like, I get it. Cause now I understand when they're like, man, like I swear I'm paying attention. It's just, I'm not getting it. And like, I feel like now I feel that. Yeah. So I'm asking a lot of questions. I'm asking people for help. I'm not too ashamed to ask for help because your girl's trying to be done with her program. And this is my last class. So I need to get it going. So I would like to get into our conversation for today. For those of you watching, you know, August is over. Summer's pretty much over. I'm sad.
Wait, is it over?
I mean, no, there's still some time till summer.
How many days? 2 days?
I don't know how many.
For August to be done?
Well, when this
comes out,
oh, yeah,
it's September.
I mean, it's chilly today already.
Well,
hence hoodie season
even
is
though
already
next week
starting.
is going to be 95 degrees.
Yes, we on a boat on Monday, gang.
On. I already put all my shorts away.
Yeah, it's going to be in the 90s on the weekend. So if you don't know, September is National Suicide Prevention Month. And so I personally feel like just the term mental health is such like a hot topic and like a word people just throw out there. But I really want to dive into a conversation of one, like, what is mental health? What does that look like for you guys? What have you experienced with mental health? Oscar, I mean, I picked you for a reason to be on here. Can you tell us a little bit what you do? And then tell us what's mental health in your eyes?
So I'm a high school counselor. So I serve 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th graders. I would say like a lot of people don't know really what school counselors do. I remember when I was a student and when I was not a counselor, but I was working in a high school setting. And there is like, you're a teacher, so you might know, there is like this, I guess it's like, I think it's just like gossip around the schools or like stereotype that like counselors don't do anything or like we're always in our office or like you never see us. It's typically because we're always dealing with crisis. And like a crisis could be a student having suicidal thoughts or like anxiety or panic attack, and this could go on for like the entire school day. Waiting for him to be assessed, SAS, waiting for the ambulance, taking him to the hospital. So maybe I'm at the hospital and I'm not at that school, right?
Oh, shoot.
So a lot of our job is related to mental health because it's social emotional learning. And that's just like probably 5% of what we do. Because everything else is kind of like academics and post-secondary, right?
Right.
But more specifically relating to mental health, for me, it's become such a huge part of my life ever since I started working as a counselor because I see the effects. And I feel like I've always seen mental health, but I've never really understood it. And I've never really recognized it because of my background and my family traditions. But now when I have to work it every single day, like I see the huge importance of awareness. How do I see it? I see it in students in many different ways, whether it's sadness, whether it's just crying, panic attacks for no reason. And like you would wonder, like, because I ask them all the time, right? Like they're coming to my office and they're like, I'm having an anxiety attack, I'm having a panic attack. And like, in my head, I'm like, what are you feeling? Like, because I want to know, like, what are you feeling? What triggered it? What is your body reacting to? Or like, what is your body feeling? What is your head feeling? Like, what are your thoughts right now? So sometimes it is difficult. Sometimes it is difficult because every kid is different. And sometimes they don't know the answer. Like, it's so shocking that they don't know why they feel sad. They don't know why they feel lonely. And they have everything. And they tell you, like, I don't know why I feel sad. Like, I have a family, I have parents, we have a house, we have a job. Like, I have friends, I'm doing good in my grades, but I feel unworthy. I feel sad, I feel lonely. So
I think it's because, like, it's like thinking about mental health and like also like being, like you said, part of our culture or part of like being brown, I guess, in a sense. Like I remember one time when my little sister, we were young, right? And she went and told my dad like that she was having suicidal thoughts, and my dad's like, "Oh, shut up." He's like, "Oh, shut up," like you're overthinking, and I get where he was going. Like where he was going is what he really wanted to say is you're stronger than this. I think like I'm hoping.
Right.
I'm wanting to think that this is the thought that my dad had behind that, but it because of the again, us being brown, us being like part of our culture, we don't want to talk about those things. So like even where you're saying like that there was people thinking these thoughts already, kids thinking these thoughts, but they don't know how to recognize where it's coming from, because again, when you go part of our culture, they don't allow us to think about that or question ourselves, why is this happening to me, or I'm in control of this, and like, which is being in control of your mental health, and so
yeah, I definitely see that. And I feel like, speaking of like cultures, I feel like specifically like Latinos, maybe even Blacks, African Americans, the minority group, it's almost like a sense of shame. I feel like a lot of families, like if their child or something were sharing like, I think I need help, or I'm not feeling happy, the immediate response is, you're stronger than this, you're fine. But I think, and I could be wrong, but maybe parents just feel shame. Like, what am I doing wrong that my child feels that way? And so if I have them talk to somebody, it's almost like I did wrong as a parent. And so they feel a sense of shame instead of thinking like, okay, you know what? Let's talk about this. If we need to get you to talk to somebody, maybe that could be the next step. But I think I don't want to say a pride thing, but I think oftentimes traditionally it's a pride thing. Like it's more like, you're fine. Like we've been through worse. We've made it through. We work hard. We've gone through a lot of stuff. You can handle it. You have everything you need. So I don't know. What are your thoughts?
And also it's like one of those things, like if we don't talk about it, it's nothing, like
it didn't happen if you don't talk about it.
Right.
And so it's crazy. So what are some things that you kind of like do to be able to bring about like an open space for your kids, to be open about these things?
Sometimes just listening. Sometimes like silence is very strong, and just giving them the space to like cry, and just giving them the space to like take the next 2 minutes, cry all that you want to cry. You want me to play some music? I'll play some music. What's your favorite music? You want to do some breathing exercises? Like, let's do this together. Like I have a huge box of fidget toys, like teddy bears. Do you want to squeeze this really hard? Do you want to scream? I'll be like, do you want to walk outside? Let's go walk outside together if you want. Like, do you want to go scream outside and just yell it out? Sometimes they just need me to open the window because they need to feel like something, whether it is like the cold, or like we'll run to the bathroom and like rinse cold water on the wrist, just to feel like they're alive.
Is it harder for like, just me thinking a lot, is it harder for guys than girls to come to you and just be open about things that they're going through in their mind?
For sure. I think that yes. Numbers wise, yes, there's a lot more females that will come to me, but I feel like boys are starting to see me in the role of like, I can be sensitive, I can be vulnerable, I can speak my thoughts, and he'll listen. And sometimes, a good way of like therapy is for you to expose your story, and get personal.
That's good, yeah.
So for them to be like, really, like you also had this, or you also feel this way.
Definitely. Yeah. I could see that.
And it becomes like
culture, like part of the culture.
Yes,
you're creating a
like,
culture.
it becomes appropriate to talk about it.
Yeah, you're not just out here like, you want to hear my trauma, guys?
Yes.
But
Yeah.
I think that's great. I think getting the students to find trust, because I feel like teenagers, children, even adults, you're not going to open up and really dig deep with somebody that you feel like, one, they don't care, two, is not investing in like making you feel better, and three, giving you the space to do that. And I think that's great that you're doing this, and shout out to all the counselors and therapists and everybody who do this. But I like what you asked, Nestor, as far as like the boys and the girls, because I feel like it's very common for men to feel like they can't show their emotion, right? They can't show feelings. It's weakness, a sign of weakness. And so do we see that changing now in our time, or do we still feel like there's this sense where men feel like, no, I don't need therapy. I don't want to show emotions. What are your thoughts?
I think definitely people have changed a lot, right? I know a lot of people so I know a lot of people that have really changed in that sense, because I think people are talking about it more, they're talking about their feelings and it's becoming part of the culture. What do you think?
I feel like it is changing for sure. I guess it could always be more, right? It could always be better. I feel like we have to be part of that change. We have to continue working by having these conversations and like letting people know that it is normal and it's a problem that is happening, and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. I mean, suicide is one of the biggest reasons of death in the United States, bigger than like car accidents. So like, if we don't talk about it, if we don't be more aware about it, then people are not going to want to talk and like reach help.
And I think like when I think about pain, which is where this comes from a lot of the times, I feel like pain connects people, and so I think whether you're a girl or a guy, however you identify, it'll connect people to that, and I think it's all about being able to creating platforms where people are able to come and talk about it. But I was just thinking about like the times that like when I would have panic attacks, and I remember like for me, I would have panic attacks all the way from grammar school to high school. Like I would literally get up and then I'll tell my teacher like I have to get out. Like I would tell her like I can't breathe. I remember the first time that it happened to me was in 6th grade, and this is where we were learning about like STDs and stuff like that. And I remember that I had a panic attack because I got molested when I was younger. I think from the ages of as young as like 3 or 4. And it wasn't right away like having sex with anybody, but it was like kind of like people groping on me. From the ages of 3 to probably like the ages of 12 to the age of 12.
Wow.
And so my first panic attack was, I remember it was in 6th grade. We were learning about sex. And I remember that it was because they were talking about like HIV and they were talking about this and that. And I'm like, could I have it? Like I started thinking like, can I have it? Like, what if I have it? Like, because somebody took advantage of me. And so I remember that was my first panic attack. And had I, had a teacher or somebody that I can be honest, because I wasn't honest with my mom about that till probably when I was like 16 years old. Yeah. And which was crazy, So all that time passed by. But I remember like I would talk to certain teachers about what I was thinking. Like one time, it was crazy, like the way my mind worked. And I wish I just had more guidance. Like there was one time, and I remember that I pushed a girl off of me, and I accidentally touched her boob, right? And I wasn't me trying to grab her boob or anything like that. But then I started thinking, because then there was a class on, do you guys remember DARE?
Yeah.
So they would talk about like abuse and stuff like that. And I'm like, I wasn't touching her on purpose, but my mind was already thinking like that. And I wish I could just have people like throughout those years just like kind of like guiding me so that these mental breakdowns that I was having, that they wouldn't create like kind of like they wouldn't go bigger than what it was, like, this wasn't you, that was an accident, like just things that you could just talk about, because I think it all starts with a conversation.
First, I'm sorry that happened to you. I never knew that.
Yeah,
Thank you for sharing that. But if you don't mind me asking, one is, at what point did you realize you were experiencing somebody, like, if you want to call it molesting you, or when did you realize it was wrong? Because you said it was going on for quite some time. Like, at what age were you wait?
I think I realized it when I was older, because, when you're younger, you don't realize that it's wrong because it's just something that you're learning. You know what I mean? Like, so unless somebody tells you that's wrong. And I feel like my parents at that time didn't really have to tell us that, because it's like you're around family, and it happened around family members, And so I didn't realize till I was 16 or 17 that I'm like, oh wait, that was wrong, you know. And then even when I was 12, when I thought when I was 12 that it was consensual between me and the person that was kind of taking advantage of me, and it wasn't consensual because you're a 12-year-old.
So grooming.
Yeah.
Were you getting groomed, would you say?
In a sense. It wasn't anybody in my direct family, like nobody in my own household, but it was like second cousins or third cousins and stuff like that. And so, yeah, it really brought a lot of anxiety throughout the years. And when I would talk to people, I would talk to people about the kind of like, I'm having a panic attack, but I wouldn't really talk to them about like,
why
the issue, like why it happened,
what triggered it.
Yeah. And what triggered was, the root was that when all that was happening, I feel like a part of like my what's it called, your willpower, you know, like for you to be able to choose what you want to choose was taken away, you know. Like I even wrote like later on I wrote like a spoken word, and it really helped me like just take it all out. And yeah, it wasn't until like kind of like high school that I'm like, that wasn't right and that wasn't right. And so I remember the way that I dealt with it was that I went to the person that I potentially thought I would not potentially, but I thought we consensually were having something. And I told them, yeah, like being an adult, I told them like what you were doing wasn't right, you know. That wasn't right, and I was a little kid, you know, and you took advantage of me. It's one thing, and this is debatable, but it's one thing when you're like the same age and like you guys are like spitting game and stuff like that to each other, but we weren't the same age. This person was like 15 years older than me, you know. And so yeah, I mean, it's something that I later on, because it even played like it affected me a lot with my sexuality, because I'm like, is it because that happened, you know, that's why I feel like I'm this way, you know. And so I've realized that it wasn't like now I'm an adult, so now I choose everything that I want, you know. If I want to choose to be with a girl, I'll be with a girl. And this took a lot of me talking to people.
Okay.
And so eventually I did, like I think when I was 16, 17, because the panic attacks continue. And so my mom's like, this is when I told my mom, and she's like, I'm going to take you to a therapist, you know. And,
okay.
And we started talking about it. And I'm glad that we have people like you that are able to, you know, just kind of slow down that monologue inside of your head that tells you otherwise, you know. And even throughout the years, like I've had to tell myself, like, you know, like this wasn't, you know, what is consensual, what is not consensual, what is this, what are you not doing, you know, because your mind, I think your whole life, you're going to have to like talk about it, you know, so that you remind yourself like of the person that you are and the person you're not, you know. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I feel like growing up, and since I'm in a room full of men, you all could kind of talk about your experience. But growing up for me, my parents were very much like, when we would go out to family parties or anywhere, my mom was like, you don't sit on anybody's lap. Like the only man's lap you sit on is your father's, like when I was little. Because, you know, uncles like, oh, come on, sit on my lap. Like, no, my mom did not play that. My grandma, they were very much like, I don't care who they are, cousins, uncles, whatever, you sit only on your father's lap and that's it. And that, even then, that's if I wanted to, but I'm daddy's girl, so of course. So at a young age, that was already instilled in me, and my parents really took time to be like, your private parts, and like naming your private parts, like as a child, like, no, that's not your little kuka, like that's your vagina, and nobody could touch you here and this. And so I'm wondering, was it similar for you guys, or is it totally different? Like as men, like growing up, do they like the observation of like, okay, my kids shouldn't do this, they should know this, they should be alert if this happens? Do you have that? Did you guys have that conversation growing up, or did they? No. What did that look like?
So to me, I didn't. But at the same time, like, so I don't want to give off the narrative that like my parents weren't in my life.
No.
So like this all happened like in between moments, you know, because my dad treated us. He has 4 boys and 1 girl. He treated his boys like there wasn't any difference if you were a boy or a girl in his family or his little tribe or whatever, because it was 5 of us. But he would take care of us. Like, we would only go out if he allowed us to, till my brothers, till we were 18. Me, I was like a rebel, so I would always just leave and stuff like
surprising.
that. But my brothers were always, if my dad said you can't go out until they were even 21, I think. If my dad would say you can't go out, they wouldn't go out. And me, I mean, it was different. But he didn't so much talk about that, but they did protect us, and they were always like very protective of us. I think it's just sometimes you trust the wrong people, and
of course
things happen.
What
But
about
I don't know
you?
about you guys.
And Marco?
So like I grew up in Mexico for the first 9 years of my life. So my parents were very hardworking. My dad was coming back and forth from the U.S., so I don't remember him from when I was little until we got to Chicago. But it was very much like a Mexican traditional machista environment with my entire family in Mexico, with my uncles, cousins, where like there was an expectation that I was gonna grow up, I was gonna go to school to 6th grade, I was gonna have a house full of cows and horses, and I was gonna be working in the fields, and that was gonna be my life. And I mean, I had already like set my mind that was gonna be my life. I think that when we got here to the U.S., both of my parents started working, so I was home by myself all the time with my brothers, and like kind of everybody was in their own. I mean, thank God, I think that like we were raised with values and morals that like we never had guidance from my parents, and like I don't judge them because they were working.
Right.
But like we could have turned so bad in the neighborhood that we were living in, and we didn't. So I think that like maybe based on like my education from Mexico helped, I don't know, but like there was never any space to speak at the house. Like I remember when I was in high school, and like I just wanted to be asked like, how was your day? I remember like asking myself, well, like why don't my parents just ask me like, how was your day? What's your favorite class? Like, what did you do in school? Like, who are your friends? Because I never had friends coming over. Like, you know, I was very, very shy. Didn't really have friends. I was, you know, very just to myself. So there was never like any communication. Like our conversations at the table, they were very much like, just be respectful. Like, you know what to do your job, like go to school, do good, get good grades. We're doing our job, you do your job. It was never like, how are you feeling? Like, how does this make you feel? And even like when I started my dancing career, like I was like, everybody comes to see their kids play a sport. Like my parents have never they've only seen me once. And like I've been dancing for over 15 years, right? But like I already know my parents, like I already know they're not gonna show up. And it's not because they don't love me, it's just because like how they were raised too.
The culture,
like they're very naive, they're very uneducated, and like I don't blame them for that.
very unintentional.
Yes, very, very unintentional. But like their love for me is pure, and for my siblings, it's pure. Like they are selfless. They will give us everything. But like I wanted and I miss, and I'm sad that I didn't get like that emotional love, like that emotional like need, you know. And I think that back to what you were saying, Nestor, like things are changing, because when I was in school, we didn't like, I don't remember my counselor. Like now we push into classrooms, like conversations like these, like what is mental health? How do we see it? How do we cope? Like what are coping mechanisms? Like what are coping strategies? And I never had that. So like we didn't know because we were never exposed to this information.
And you know what's crazy? Like sometimes we start teaching our parents things.
Oh, yes.
Because like my dad would never apologize, ever in his life about anything. And I like maybe last year or the year before that, he did something very bad. And, you know, like I was so upset with him. And I told my dad, like you don't understand, like my whole life I have lived with people pushing my boundaries, you know, and not like respecting me as a human being. And now that, like, you know, I turned the leaf, you know, because you can't stay stuck, you know. Like, so everything that I mentioned today, like, I know that it didn't happen to me, and I always say, like, it happens for me. And I told my dad, and you made me feel like everything that I've done and everything that I've accomplished, and, like, me turning a leaf, like, not only, like, in my profession and in, like, what I'm doing in life, but like inside of me, like you just shitted on all that, you know, you did it and I allowed you to, and I can't believe I did that, you know. And I remember that my dad had never apologized, and he apologized that day. You know, he apologized, and he kept telling my aunt and everybody that he's sorry about the way he acted and stuff like that. And because my dad, I mean, he treated me with a lot more respect, you know, than my brothers. Like he did, you know. Parents know their kids.
I was about to say, is it because, not that you challenged him, but you kind of made him
I think he knew that I was a little bit different, you know.
Oh.
I think dad knew he
Special.
He was a little bit different, and so he always had that. But that day, but he was not intentional, like as far as like with his words, and so he did become more intentional, like these last couple of years. And so that day, I really, like, I mean, it's a shame that it happened with me, and that he had to disrespect me in order for him to like understand that principle. But he understood that principle, and I remember that day I had to really meditate on the fact that no matter how people bring disrespect, like that, it doesn't change anything in my mind, and it shouldn't change anything in my mind. It shouldn't change anything within me. You know, and I should be a solid person, you know. But that doesn't mean that you don't go through things in your head, you know. And so that's not to say, you know, like I always tell everybody that I don't mess up. You know, I mess up a lot, but I'm able to have a conversation with people because
and reflect.
Because I know that not only is my mental, like my mindset and my mental health on the line, but there's other people, you know, that from me, they can feel like that, you know. They can feel like disrespected. They can feel like, you know, you got to think about others, and the way you would want people to respect your mental health and just where you're going in your journey, it's the same way that you give that off to people, you know. So I always tried my best to like, hey, if I did anything, I'm like, me and Tati, I'm so glad that me and her got so close, because like, at first, it wasn't like that, but no. I don't know what goes on in her mind, you know? And so you know, you have to check in with people and be better, you know? And I try to be better. So anyone out there?
Nestor, sorry. On behalf of Nestor,
I'm not a bad person.
What about you, Marco? What was your experience like growing up?
My experience was my parents were always working. So, you know, typical Mexican upbringing. They sacrificed everything for us. They sacrificed everything to work, to become successful in their eyes, and to give us a better future. And so that led to me not really seeing them. And, you know, similar to Oscar, like, you know, I was just kind of on my own. I'm 15 years younger than my next sibling. So I'm kind of like an only child. By the time like I was born, my sister had her quinceañera. My brothers were going to college. By the time they came back, I was like, who are you guys? I've never met you in my life. So it was difficult. It was a little lonely, but at the same time, it was like, now as an adult, now it's what I do. Like I understand it. I'm grateful for that. But yeah, growing up, it was tough. It was just basically me. And, you know, I had one cousin and my aunt who I would hang out with. And that was about it, really. That's what my childhood was.
So now that you're a father and you have your daughter, like, how do you see yourself, even like as she's being raised? We're talking about mental health and what it was like for us growing up and what conversations we had. How do you see yourself navigating that with your daughter?
Well, I think my response to my trauma is similar to Oscar too. Like, my parents were never at my stuff. They never came. They never did anything. So now, like, my daughter has been doing swim class since she was 2 months old. So I go swimming cute. Every Monday. I try to go as much as possible, just to like go be there, right? Like, she's not going to remember. She's not going to know. But I myself, it's a response to what happened to me. So trying to be there for my daughter, trying to spend as much time as I can with her. Even though I work all day and, you know, I can have the most stressful day in the world, I just go straight home and I'm with her. The first time that like I missed her sleep time, like when we put her to bed, her bedtime, I like cried. Like I literally was crying because I was like, I'm not gonna like say goodnight to her. And so
that's so cute.
That's something that's a response to like what happened to me. And I think that, you know, similar to what we were talking about earlier, like our parents, I believe a lot of first generation immigrants don't have the luxury that we had to know that we had trauma, right? They didn't have the luxury to say, okay, let me stop and realize what's going on, like why I feel this way. They were under so much pressure to make it that they just said, okay, screw all those feelings. Like, we have to get it done. We have to get ahead. We have to make it better for our family. Like, we're our only shot. So that in itself is trauma that they inflicted on themselves, and they were inflicted by their family members. But they didn't have the forwithal, the mindset to think about it. So now, like, 30 years later, 40 years later, they've been like that their whole life. And you tell them, oh, you remember all this that happened to me? And they're like, no, none of that happened. What are you talking about? That didn't happen. You're crazy. You had a great life. You had better than I had to walk. I had to walk 5 montañas, and like I had to walk 20 miles in the snow, and you got a car. Like, relax. And so now, as a father, I think it's just making sure that, like, my daughter is able to grow up with as little trauma as possible, and also that I'm there present for her, right? And I'm there for her as much as I can be, because I went through that with my own parents.
And I see that, and I'm glad you all shared your stories. As a teacher, right? I'm not a mother. I don't have siblings, but as a teacher, I could see it in my students. Like, you could tell, like, right away the students. Yeah, not even that something's going on, but like there's certain kids, those are the first ones I want to talk to. It's body language. Yeah. It's like they come in and they don't talk to anybody, and they're there, they daze. There's certain things you notice. And so I don't make it so obvious, but I do check-ins with all my students. Like, I love that. I literally would be like, let's talk. Like last week, I was like, okay, we have 15 minutes left of class. Like, we did our lesson, it was on Friday. And so I was like, you have 3 options, okay? Option number 1, if you want to revise your writing assignment, because I gave them feedback, if you want to revise it for a better grade, you could work on that. Option 2, if you want to get started on your senior tasks. So I give them a list of things to do as seniors, like to prepare them to get ready for graduation and all the requirements. So like research colleges, this, whatever. I was like, you could start that. Yeah. Or option 3, you could come have a conversation with me. And I was like, and the conversation is literally whatever you want it to be. Not like, so tell me, why do you love English? And no, nothing like that. And it's literally of like, how was your first week as a senior? What are your hopes? What are your hesitations? And just allowing students to talk without giving them this boundary of what to talk about. The things they will tell you, and this is the first week of school. I didn't know any of them before this year. It was already Friday, and then I have kids telling me about what they're passionate about and how they need to find a job and they're struggling, but they also want to help their mom too. That's why they want to find a job. Kids will tell you so much if you give them the space, and just like, it's not forced. Because a lot of times, like, I think there's so many great strategies like to promote positive mental health in that, but sometimes you could tell what's very generic, like, oh, I'm just reading off of a script and we're gonna do this because I have nothing else planned. I feel like the best thing you could do sometimes for teens is giving them that space and just talk to them. And you know what, I don't think not even teens, like adults, like giving them that space to not talk about work. I think in my class last week, we all, the typical school thing, even in college, we do this. In the PhD program, they do this. It's like, what's your name? Tell us what year in the program this is. And then one was like, tell me something about you that has nothing to do with your job, has nothing to do with school. Like, just tell me about you. How are you? Yeah. And something like that could be so powerful.
Yeah, I was going to say 2 things. One, I like your, what is it called? Shimmer? Or what is it? What is this? See, I'm not.
I have blush on, but it has like a little.
I love it. I love
this. This is from 6:30 in the morning, by the way, because I come from work.
That was the first thing I was gonna say. But the second thing I was gonna say, I think the biggest thing, well, for me and mental health, is breaking the ice. I feel like that's the biggest thing. Like, and I think that's good. Like, you having that with your students, it's like an icebreaker. And it's so important, and then back to what I was going to say about with teaching, like maybe, because now I think it's different because we're teaching a new generation on how to be able to be more open, but also like, I have a heart for like older people. Like I do like our parents, and there's been moments where like, I've had conversations with, I know my limit because I don't want my parents to just dump all their baggage on me.
Wow. Same. Tell me how you really feel.
Well, that's because then that affects your mental health. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I want to I always looked at myself as a bridge, how can I connect with this new generation and be like, have my story be helpful for them and their mental health, and being able to be like break the ice with them about that, but also with like our parents, you know, like
What can you learn from their stories?
Like there's times where like I've told my mom, because she's told me crazy things where I'm like, you know, the normal, the kid me would be like, oh my God, my mom's like losing it, you know. But then because I'm an adult now, dang, we're adults. Because we're adults now, I'm able to tell her like, hey, you know, everybody has those intrusive thoughts.
Yeah. Yes.
We all have intrusive thoughts. Like everybody in this world has had it, you know, and you would be surprised about the things that we think about, but that doesn't mean that any of it is true, you know. And that's something that I love to be able to talk to my mom about it, especially, you know, she was going through menopause. So, you know,
Why put her out there?
I mean, she talks about it all the time, but, but I would tell her like, man, like you're going to be okay. Like you just got to talk about it, you know, maybe not to me all the time. Like I'm here to talk about it. She always tells everybody I'm her best friend because of that.
Aww.
But you need to find people that, you know, are married, you know, that can connect with you, you know, because those are a lot of things. There's a lot of things that add on to like our mental health and it being bad at times, you know, but I think you can never get away from the like that wholesome just conversation with someone, that therapy, you know. I'm a strong believer in therapy and talking it out, you know. And so, yeah, so those are the things that I would say, like, don't forget about. Like, yeah, talk about to the new generation and, you know, let's create this culture about being able to be open about mental health, but also don't forget about the people that we can also teach, which is like people that might have gone through some of the things that we've gone through, but they're older now and they just locked it away. And one thing is that it'll always come back unless you deal with it, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
You know, and that's something that I've understand about my life, so I've had to talk about it, you know, and that's why we're here now.
Yeah. I feel like not only as a teacher, but like as a coach, right? And you taught teens for many years. And so like, I feel like that's something I implement all the time.
Yeah.
But Oscar, he runs a dance company, and your company ranges from like different ages, right? You have some, what's your youngest member on your team right now?
18.
18, right? So like young adults all the way until adults in their 30s, right? And one thing I think that's so remarkable about your company that I personally don't see often in companies is you really, really value mental health, but you make it a part of your team. Like I've seen you guys stop rehearsals or before or after rehearsals, and you guys are doing activities. Yeah. And like, I feel like I only see that, right, in these like teens or like programs with students and children. So like, can you talk a little bit about that? Like what made you and Karen, your co-director, what made you guys decide to make that a priority, and how does that look in your space?
Well, I think that I've always included like mental health ever since I started coaching, even like before I really knew about mental health, like back when I was coaching high school students. And then it just became like, oh, this is actually a thing. Like, this is like what I was doing for all these years is mental health. Like this was like coping strategies. This was like mental health strategies. I never knew before, but they were working and students liked it, and it was like benefiting them. To the point where like I had parents telling me that their students had like seizures, and because of the team, like seizures stopped, or like their eating disorder stopped. And I was like, really? And I was like, what is like, I was evaluating myself as a coach, and I was like, what is causing that? Because it can't just be dance. It can't just be like being part of something. And it was like having these conversations. Like back in the day, we used to call it circle talks.
Yep. Yeah. Talking circles.
So when Karen and I decided to start a company, like I already knew the importance that this brought into like the community. And I have been part of the dance community now more professionally, and I didn't see that. And I still heard problems happening in companies. And I was like, why don't we just have a moment to talk? Like, why can't we get into a circle like I do with my kids and like just talk about ourselves to get to know each other? So that's kind of like where the idea came from. And like, you know, Karen also comes from social work background. So we like wanted to just, you know, build on each other's power brains.
That's cool. It feels like a family, right?
Yeah, it's really like, believe it or not, like when we have our circle talks, like it really brings everybody together. And it like, and everybody
like that.
becomes vulnerable, and like we have, you know, we always start with like our norms or like our expectations. Like there are norms when we have circle talks. You know, be respectful. What is said in the circle stays in the circle, so that people can feel free to share and talk.
Yeah.
I think that's great. I think so. A lot of times when they try to do this in the workplace, again, it feels forced. Like, oh, we're going to do this breathing workshop with this person who's going to come in. And it's like, I could see the benefit of that, but don't structure it like that.
Yes.
It's almost like you're taking away my prep period where I could like plan and actually grade papers because I have to come do this podcast so I don't get home till late. But you know what I'm saying? So it's like, make it more meaningful to my time where it feels genuine. So
It's like an organic thing, you know, which it should be organic.
absolutely.
And for us, it's always like we don't time it. Like, and I've always tell them like our rehearsal is 2 hours and a half. We can start the activity if we feel like we need to extend the activity because of what the information that is being shared. Then we will. And if it's gonna be 10 minutes, it's gonna be 10 minutes. Sometimes it is just like going around the circle and saying like from 1 to 10, how's your mental health? And
Something
for us,
simple
that's
like
like
that.
it gives us the information that like, you know, Tati's at a 4. Then like after rehearsal, I will text her and I'll be like, hey, like what's going on? Is everything okay? But it's more personal. So at that point, like they're more more like, I guess freely to open up than like in the circle. And I'll be like, just give me your number. You don't have to go into deep. And some people do, like, I'm at a 5, like this is how my day was. And some other, like the people that are typically shy, they would just be like, I'm at a 4, like it's just that type of day. But at least that gives me context to like check in later.
Yeah, and you also have a temperature check, especially if you're doing this before rehearsal. So you're already like, okay, if they're a little off today, I get it, right? I understand. And I think that's super important. What were you going to say?
I was going to say, so you're always checking in with people, right? Like your students, whether it's your dance students or your...
Like the work like at school.
Well, how about like you? Like, how do you... Because it's a lot. Like, I know, like, when my mom tells me, like, her tea, or, like, my friends tell me their tea, or, like, my clients tell me their tea, I just feel, like, so overwhelmed because I feel like it's so much, like, energy. And, I mean, I'm not...
You're also an empath.
Yeah. I'm not complaining about it because I love to be able to do that. But what do you do, 1? And then 2, like, what would you suggest to, like, people that are always, like, the ones kind of like getting all that weight put on
So
them.
like to not take it home. Like if you had all these like students with all these...
But just like people that are like leading,
crisis.
like whatever, like whether it's their businesses or their teachers but they're like kind of like, in a sense, they have some sort of like leadership role in their, whatever they're doing, which makes them be the last person, you know, to
like
take
who
everything
checks
in.
on them?
Yeah, who checks on them? How do you...
So who checks on you, right?
1, and
how
then...
do you deal with all the information, all the crises?
Yeah.
So I would say, thank you for asking. That's an awesome question. I've always wanted somebody to ask me that question.
Oh, that's
So,
Ding. No, just kidding.
so this is my 3rd year of counseling. My first 2 years were very, very difficult. We were coming back from a pandemic.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
And like I was a counselor right after the pandemic, not having a real like internship because my internship was virtual. So like I basically had to teach myself on the job. And I would literally, like my very first year, I would literally go into our filing room and I would cry. And I would be like, I'm in a position where like, so when we were in school, they would tell us like counselors are like doctors because their life is literally at your hands. So if you don't do protocol the appropriate way, like if you let a kid go after they said they had dark thoughts, like you never know what's gonna happen after they leave the school, right? So it's a huge responsibility. And at the beginning, it was very difficult for me to disconnect, like you're saying, like to leave school and for me to be like, oh my God, what if this student goes home and like he's gonna take the train station and like what if he doesn't make it home? Like, so I would like not sleep and like just hope to see him the next morning. And then I would come home to like my mom's stuff too, or like my family stuff too, or like my friends stuff too. And like friends would dump. I don't know why, like sometimes you just get
You're that
from
person,
everywhere.
yeah.
Like,
You're the person.
and it's just like and even on dates, let me tell you, like it's crazy.
On
like,
dates?
Yeah. Like you'll tell people that you're a counselor and then they'll just dump your stuff. And it's
my
like,
God.
I'm not working right now.
Okay.
But anyway, back to the question. So I kind of just
I would
like,
probably do that.
I just told myself, you can only do so much.
Yeah.
Like you also
You're
have
not
to
God.
live, you also have to live your life, and like you're doing the most that you can. I guess like as long as I feel that I am doing the most that I can while I'm at work, like I cannot control their life everywhere they go.
Right.
Like I cannot control their actions once they leave the school. I can't. And if I'm gonna create like, and if I'm gonna like, I guess, stress myself over things that I can't control, then it's never gonna end.
It's not healthy for you either. Yeah. So who checks on you?
I would say like my best friend Marcos Trejo. If he sees this podcast, I'll probably share with him. And the only reason why I feel like he understands me so much is because he's also an educator. And I don't think that I can talk to anybody else that is not in education because I feel like it's hard for them to understand. Not that they can listen.
No, I get it.
But I have tried, whether it's with my parents, with other friends that are in other fields. But I almost feel like when I start to talk to them, they're like waiting for me to finish.
Yeah.
Have you ever felt that?
Yeah.
Like you're talking to somebody and they're just like, but they're just like looking at you and not really listening. And like he really understands and like he can relate.
Yeah, I think it's because again that that thought of people that the thought that people have about counselors, like that they, like you said, they don't do anything, you know.
Yeah, and like a lot of people will tell you that a therapist has to have a therapist and a counselor has to have a therapist. I don't feel like I'm there yet. I'm not saying that I'm never gonna reach that point. Maybe in the future. Luckily, I've been able to just manage my feelings and emotions, and I am able to control them. I feel like mental health is a lot of like self-control. Like once you feel like you don't have control over your life, like once I can't wake up for work, if I can't like manage my time, if I don't make it to work, if I,
Right.
then I will reach for help for sure.
I do want to end on this because we have to wrap it up. But I heard this 12-6-6 rule. And I feel like that could be applicable to mental health. So what they're saying is you have 12 hours that you should invest in just being ambitious, working on you, doing things that are going to make you better, like being productive, like con ganas, like that. And then you have 6 hours where you just do things for you, not necessarily to be better, but things you enjoy, things that bring you peace, things that just make you happy for you, like self-care. And then you go to sleep.
Like
then
me.
you have 6 hours to
my lips.
you have 6 hours to like sleep together. That's 24 hours in a day. So it doesn't necessarily have to be those specific numbers, but I do think it comes with having some type of not pattern, but some kind of schedule in your life that works for you, and you allow yourself time for things that bring you peace. So like every morning I have it on my phone. I've been doing it for over a year. It pops up at 7:15 because that's the time I typically pull into work, and it says, God, show me how great it could get. And I repeat that 3 times, and it's like, God, I believe in you and I love you. Show me how great it could get. And for some reason that sets the tone for my day, and I feel like that brings me peace with whatever could happen with the day. And so it's small things like that I think could make the smallest difference in somebody's day, life, and just learning not only coping mechanisms, like what to do to deal with drama, but what can you do to prevent yourself from going somewhere dark.
Yeah.
Or allowing one bad thing in your day to just ruin it for you. I think, and that comes with age, it comes with times, it comes with people modeling that and these types of conversations. So
Yeah, I always have that scripture, and I've said it before, is that God hasn't given me a spirit of fear, but of love, power, and a sound mind. So every single time that, like, because I do have these thoughts too, and like I do get overwhelmed, and there's a lot going on in what I do, and so I always think about that, and it really helps me it reminds me that everything's gonna be okay. That whatever fear, whatever like dark cloud wants to come over me, like that's not part of how God made me.
Yes.
Like I'm full of love. I have a sound mind and I have self-control. And so there's things that happen, and I think you have to be a better person, but keeping that in mind all the time and just meditating on that.
Definitely. Well, thank you for joining us today,
Thanks for having
Oscar.
me,
This was
guys.
beautiful.
Yeah, thanks. I
Thank
really
you,
loved it.
Nestor, for being so vulnerable and like really modeling the beauty of just talking and sharing your story, because there's somebody watching that could probably 100% relate to you, and you probably made them feel that much more confident to talk to somebody else about that. So thank you, gentlemen, for being here.
Course.
Thank you all for watching. Remember, National Suicide Prevention Month. So check up on your friends. Who checks up on you? Take time to give yourself a little bit more love than normal. I am Tati. You can find me at Talk with Tati.
I am Nestor. You can find me at the Brabro.
I'm Oscar. You can find me at Urbina Roxo.
And this is Never Too Shy Pod. You can follow us on all platforms, and you can email us at nevertooshypod@scenepena.co.
Yay!
Boom! I got it. Thank you all for watching.
Bye.